This is my £300 heat pump that I use to heat my house. One of the limiting factors of any heat pump is the evaporator getting frozen in cold weather. This is a close-up view of the evaporator inside the heat pump and has been sped up 30 times. So the outside air constantly is blown through the cold fins of the evaporator. Any humidity in the air unfortunately condenses out and freezes on the cold surface of the evaporator. And eventually this will block the airflow and stop the heat pump working. So the machine detects this with a temperature sensor and shuts down to defrost. This happens continuously about once every 10 minutes. The amount of time spent defrosting seems to depend on the weather, and it affects the heat pump's power output. If it's shutting down to defrost, it's not going to be putting out much power. So I've been measuring how frequently it does this and trying to make a sort of duty cycle and see what affects it and stuff. And first of all, I was sitting there with a stopwatch measuring when it switches on and when it switches off, but that quickly got boring. So what I've come up with is this. Now what I do is I use this power meter here, and at the moment it's on 560 watts, which is what it draws when it's running. But then when it goes over to defrost mode, what happens is the heat pump switches off, but just the fan runs. So if we switch over to just fan only, the watts drops down to 115 watts for just the fan. Put it back again. So what I've come up with is this little equation here. So what I do is I change the setting to kilowatt hours to measure the energy instead of the power. There you go, kilowatt hours. And I measure that over a time, and I measure the time as well, and so I can say, oh, over 5 hours I've drawn this many kilowatt hours, and then I divide the kilowatt hours by the time, and that gives you a wattage. And if the wattage is the same as the fan wattage, then this term goes to 0. So then that means your heat pump was off all the time. But if this term is the same as the heat pump power, that makes the top and bottom the same. So it is 1. So that means that the duty cycle was on all the time. And and if it's somewhere in between, you can find out if it was on 80% of the time or 50% of the time. And those are the kind of swings that I've had so far. I've had most of them it's on 80% of the time and defrosting 20% of the time. But when it's particularly humid, it can defrost. It can be defrosting as much as half the time. And I want to know this so I can plug it into my spreadsheet and work out how much power this thing puts out on average.